The great John Morris joins us from Waco, Texas. What's up,
I don't
John?
know where you're getting that information. That is a stretch. But I'm glad
Man,
to be
that's
on with
Ari.
you. How are you?
That's your buddy. That's your buddy Ari Temkin. On every time I hear you on SXM, I'm like, wow, wow, that's
That's
cool.
that's in
Because I mean,
that's
I
in
can.
lieu of compensation, is what that is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? They don't. They don't compensate me either. And when I've
Yeah.
been on, I have yet to hear the word great, but that's okay.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
deal with it. Hey, were you guys even, and I told our audience yesterday, Baylor, their spring football game last Saturday, Mother Nature put a crimp in that, like Mother Nature has been known to do. And Oklahoma moved theirs early in the week to Friday night and was able to navigate that. Baylor was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I know I had it. I was up in Miami watching NEO scrimmage and doing some grandson, having some grandson time. And when I got home, I look at it and I'm like, this is not the Baylor spring game. Wonder what happened. And I get on the internet and find out how many minutes before it was shifted to the indoor.
Uh, Kind of right at the last minute because we
Yeah.
waited as long as we could, and there was a real strong line of not just rain but thunderstorms coming through. But we wanted to play it, and Coach Rule was really strong against moving it unless we absolutely had to, because people had made their way to Waco for this deal. It was kind of a big green and gold weekend. We had a lot going on. Baseball and softball were at home in the spring game, and then the unveiling of these new Nike marks. So because of all that, they waited as long as they could. But basically, the lightning strikes dictated that there was no way we were playing outside. So they just had to move it indoors.
Now, obviously, television didn't get moved over there, and you've got limited space in the indoor. Were you guys set up to do the game on radio?
No, we were going to do radio TV, and
Okay.
when it moved and moved at the very last second, we just didn't have time to move over there. So we ended up just watching the scrimmage, and that was it.
Okay. Well, hey, got a day off, able to focus on
Yeah.
that a little bit more. But all right, so this spring, and I said Baylor's got a returning quarterback in Charlie Brewer. I think he very much solidified himself as both the talent guy at the position, but although also the leader within the team last year. And I think Matt Rule made sure he felt he was challenged by some of the other guys on the roster. There's some things to rework, but defensively, you get some weapons back. Your thoughts on Baylor? Because I really think this is a team that and I know they made a huge jump last year, but this is a team that is primed to, compete for the upper division and maybe press the top two everybody's pointing at in Oklahoma and Texas.
I know Coach Rule just wants to keep that upward trajectory. That's the big thing. To go from one win his first year here, and everybody, was sort of braced for that and the transition and everything. But he recruited really well even in that first year. And then to go from one win to 7, including a bowl victory over Vanderbilt, I mean, that's a big jump, Robert. You know that. To go plus 6 wins, nobody in the country had a bigger jump in wins than Baylor and 2 other schools last year. So he just wants to keep that upward trajectory. And what does that mean win-wise? I don't think it means plus 6 again this year, but anything close to that. And that's what their aim is. That's what their goal is coming into this year.
How important and how much better, just from what you've seen this spring and the way he closed down the 2018 season, how much better is Brewer?
I just think he is going to be better every time he steps on the field. That's kind of his mindset, and it's really fun to watch. He's so serious about the game and so serious about being the best quarterback he can be and the best leader for this team that I think he can be better. I mean, it's saying a lot. This will be his 3rd year as a starter, or second and a half year as a starter, and just that experience that he has now, that's very valuable. And as hard as he works, I think he can be better in a number of areas this year. So that's fun to watch. It's just really fun to watch how hard he works and how serious he takes that position. And he is, man, he's our key guy, at quarterback with that the starts that he has under his belt already.
What about the weapons around him? I know that I think at times Baylor didn't run the ball as well as they wanted to a year ago. Um, I look at the wide receiver weapons. There were some older guys that I know that they were able to lean on there. But when you look at the skill guys, what does that look like?
Well, backfield in the spring, you really didn't see everybody. I mean, they had some guys recovering from surgeries. They had some guys that were out with some nicks, and so they didn't push them. Jermichael Hasty is going to be there in the backfield, but he didn't do much this spring. John Lovett is going to be interesting to watch because he's a really good tailback, and he was nicked up a little bit in the spring, but they're also giving him a look at safety. So that'll be fun to see where he ends up. So it really left Tristan Ebner as our main guy in the backfield, and he had a really big bowl game. He had 90 yards rushing, he had 199 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. And he's that kind of weapon, running or receiving, that's really good out of the backfield. So Tristan Ebner got the bulk of the work out of the backfield in the spring. And then receivers, we got Chris Platt back. He got a 6th year. So that'll be good to have him back, and his speed that he has on the outside. And Denzel Mims is back. Denzel was maybe a little disappointing to some people last year, but he was a 1,000-yard receiver 2 years ago. So it's good to have him back. He's had a lot of snaps himself. So I think there are plenty of weapons like those guys that Charlie Brewer will have at his disposal this year.
Yeah, Jalen Hurd was the older guy that I thought they leaned on, and
Yeah.
Brewer leaned on at times for big plays. Like I said, over on the defensive side, I think a spot that a lot of people thought for Baylor last year was challenged, maybe challenged depth wise, but is certainly getting better. Is the defensive line?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is so hard to find really top-notch defensive linemen. That may be the toughest place. Do you think that's the toughest spot to recruit, really quality guys to?
And let me give you an example, okay?
Okay. Okay.
Uh, Zach had a kid at NEO last year, LaRon
Yep.
Stokes, that ended up being an All-American defensive end, really good player, homeschool kid from Tulsa that they just kind of
Mm-hmm.
developed. At the end, right after they finished their bowl game, he visited Oregon. Virginia Tech was down to see him, their defensive coordinator, begging him to come to Blacksburg. Uh, Gundy helicoptered up there. I think Lincoln Riley maybe got a motorcade escort. He visited. I think he visited all those schools. I mean, this guy he was getting treated. LaRon Stokes is his name, and he grew up in Tulsa. He had that OU thing, and so he signs with OU. I watched
Okay.
him Friday night in their spring game, John. He's a
Right.
255-pound defensive end. I
Oh, wow.
watch him Friday night, and he's playing 3 tech for OU. He gets a sack, plays well. Well, I see him Saturday up at the NEO scrimmage. I said, "Hey, LaRon, I just saw you last night. You played pretty good, but what the heck were you doing playing 3 technique?"
Yeah.
I mean, he's only 255. He goes, "Mr. Allen, they told me to be ready, and maybe I need to put on some weight because we don't have that many guys." And that's OU.
Wow.
So if
Yeah.
OU's having to move defensive ends to defensive tackle, what does that
Yeah.
say for the rest of the league?
That's what I'm
There you
saying.
go.
I mean, there just aren't that many of those guys, that are sack daddies in there at that position around to be had. But that being said, we lost a couple of guys to graduation this year, and they feel like that we're developing some depth in there, both lines, really, the offensive line and the defensive line, and that's been a real source of recruiting that they focused on, just to get some quality guys, to get some depth in there. So is it a question? Yeah, maybe, for Baylor, maybe it is for a lot of schools going in, but they certainly spend a lot of time and attention on the defensive line.
Well, and you guys have a defensive end, and I'm trying to think of his name, but he was under publicized last year. I thought he was one of the better
Yeah,
defensive
James
ends I
Lynch.
saw on
James
tape.
Lynch.
Yes,
Yes.
Lynch. I'm like, this guy's really good.
Yeah. And he was a true sophomore. He was a freshman All-American 2 years ago. He was a true sophomore. So he started since day one, and he is really good. I mean, I think he is, in my mind, he's our best defensive lineman, hands down.
Yeah. Special teams. I mean, I know I have nightmares from one special teams play in Waco last year. So, so
Yeah, I don't know what
anyway,
you're talking
how do
about,
your
but
special teams look?
we will have a new punter and a new kicker this year. So that's a change because Drew Galitz has been here for 4 years. He's been our punter and our kickoff guy, and he's been really good. But Drew Galitz is gone. We've got a guy who was a redshirt freshman last year. He's a punter from Colorado. And I just remember in fall camp last year, he was booming the ball. I mean, he was matching whatever Drew Galitz did. He was doing the same thing. So I think they feel really good about him, and he's obviously got a strong leg. He may end up being our kickoff guy as well. And then we'll see how things pan out with with a field goal kicker. But it's going to look different. And we've got some pretty good speedsters, returning kicks and returning punts. So I think we'll be pretty good on that end, on the other side of special teams.
Yeah, I have to ask you this. Matt Rule. Every time you hear him talk about Baylor, he talks about how much he loves the culture, loves Waco, that it's a great fit for him. Yet, and I guess Baylor needs to feel pretty good, pretty accomplished because the NFL's come after this guy a couple of times really hard, and he's still in Waco wearing Baylor green and gold.
Yeah, and that may be a yearly thing. He is very highly thought of. It sounds like by the NFL and certain franchises as well. And I just hope we can keep him long term. I don't know how long that'll be actually, but I'm glad we've got him right now. I think it's a compliment to him and what he's done here, and the way he runs the program. That NFL teams do look at him. I mean, he had an interview for an NFL head coaching job after we went 1-11, and I think that says a lot about him, really. So that may be a yearly occurrence here.
Well, again, John Morris, voice of the Baylor Bears, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this before I let you go because I know you do Baylor baseball on television. And by the way, I guess we'll all be doing a lot of our work on ESPN Plus on TV side in the future, but with that new deal. But I was going to ask you about Baylor baseball because in first place, I know that program has kind of been a little bit like the football program, the way it's kind of risen. And Baylor really stout this year. And the best thing I think for Oklahoma State is if they can stay in sight there in second or third of Baylor, the Bears come here to finish the regular season with a series in Stillwater.
Yeah, and that seems like a long time away because it's a tough closing stretch for Baylor. We won last night over Sam Houston State, by the way, which wore orange and black, and I had to catch myself every time not to call them Oklahoma State. But they had on those orange tops and black trim and black undershirts. But Baylor won that game 9-6, and so the closing four series for Baylor, and we beat OU 2 out of 3 this past weekend. The third game was a walk-off 12-inning win. But the closing series are at Tech this weekend, at TCU the following weekend, Kansas State at home, and then at Oklahoma State. So that is a tough stretch to close the regular season. 3 of those 4 on the road, and I hope Baylor and Oklahoma State are playing each other with a lot on the line in early May.
Yeah, that would be nice. Cowboys got past DBU last night, 3 home runs, and Trevor Boone had a whale of a night. Scored 2, knocked in 2, had a home
Wow.
run, and Colin Simpson, the tank, got him a home run, and they beat DBU 6-3. So 2 good wins. A good one for Baylor last night, non-con midweek, because Sam Houston State's got a good program, and then obviously Coach Holliday has a lot of respect for the Patriots at DBU. So, well, hey, John, again, I appreciate it, and we will look forward to running into you somewhere, sometime, maybe the baseball tournament. But we'll look forward to seeing you.
I look forward to that. I appreciate being on, and we got equestrian in town now, and I saw Larry Sanchez yesterday, so I told him I'd give you his best, visiting with him with
All right.
equestrian in town for the national championships.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Hey,
Yeah, yeah.
again, the great John Morris, and like I said, we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Stop with
I'm
that.
I'm
I appreciate it.
uh, all
I
right,
appreciate it.
John John Morris, voice of the Baylor Bears.